Great Karnak inscription of the Pharaoh Merneptah begins with a list of the enemies he faced in year 5 of his reign. The main antagonist, Merye, the wretched chief of the Libyans, was assisted by his allies, the Shurdan, the Shekelesh, Ekwesh, the Lukka, and Teresh, the northerners who came from every land. Many of these people remain, for the most part, shrouded in mystery. But the Lukka stand out on this list as a group about which we actually know a fair bit. So what can we say about the Lukka? Where are they from? And what can we say about their history and culture? Let's dig in. The reference to the Lukka in year 5 of Merneptah's reign is actually one of our latest references to this group of people. Chronologically, what is probably our first reference to Lukka comes not from Egypt, but from Anatolia. In the annals of Suppiluliuma I or II, we read about the Hittite king overcoming a rebellion from a group known to modern scholarship as the Assuwan Confederacy. This was a group of polities in western Anatolia who banded together to oppose Hittite influence in the region. The first group listed in the text is fragmentary, with the first sound missing, but what is extant reads Uga. Most Hittiteologists restore it as Lugga and equate it with the Lukka known from much later texts. If this restoration is accurate, which it's widely accepted, this is our first reference to Lukka and the Lukka Lands, and we see them as part of a wider Western Anatolian confederacy and in opposition to the Hittites, things which would characterize their history for the next few centuries. Now, more or less since the beginning of the decipherment of the Karnak inscription, where the Lukka were first encountered by modern scholarship, scholars have linked them with the territory known in classical antiquity as Lycia. From the sources we'll go over here in a moment, we'll see that Lukka seems to be both a geographical designation and a sort of ethnic designation. Geographically, it refers to the area west of classical Pamphylia and Pisidia, and includes Lycia, and up to the eastern side of Caria. While this larger territory could refer to the Lukka Lands, the core of Lukka territory was concentrated on the Xanthus River. This is a rugged region, and it's difficult to navigate into, making it difficult to conquer and subdue. This also made it difficult to unify under a central authority or state. In fact, in all the Hittite sources, there is no reference to a king or central leader of the Lukka. There is no vassal treaty with the Lukka because apparently there was no entity with which such a treaty could be made. Instead, Lukka seems to be a collection of independent towns and communities, and some scholars have even hypothesized a sizable itinerant element within the Lukka. What seems to have unified them was a sense of kinship, either real or fictive, and a shared culture. They likely spoke Luwian, as this was the common language of Western Anatolia, and likely shared a similar culture, though admittedly a lack of archaeological work in late Bronze Age Lycia makes this assertion speculative. It is clear that they were gifted mariners, and the numerous sheltered harbors along the rocky coast no doubt provided important shelters for those who had a penchant for piracy, which it seems many of the Lukka had. Our next reference comes approximately 80 years later after Tutulia's victory over the Assuwa Confederacy, and is from the Amarna letters. But it's not from Egypt, but rather a letter written to Egypt, likely the pharaoh Akhenaten, from the great king of Alasia, a kingdom on the island of Cyprus. In the letter, what we can see is that there were raiders coming from the direction of Cyprus, and possibly with Cypriot mariners, that had targeted Egyptian territory for raiding. This understandably upset the pharaoh, who demanded answers from the king on Cyprus. In reply, the Cypriot king protests that he too is being raided year by men from Lukki. Most scholars understand this to mean seasonal raiding by men from the territory of Lukka or Lukki. And so the king of Alasia protests that he too is suffering a similar fate from these pirate raids, which is no doubt the same Lukka from later sources. In the 13th century, we find several more references to the Lukka in both Hittite and Egyptian sources, where we sometimes get competing descriptions of what's going on. For example, Ramses II, in his Kadesh inscriptions, records his list of enemies, those allied with the Hittites, and he includes Lukka. We also see from several 13th century Hittite sources that Lukka was often in rebellion against the Hittites, rarely if ever under Hittite control. During the reign of Merdeptah II, we see that the Lukka was a land that is in revolt against the Hittites. In a treaty document between the Hittite king Muwatalli II, who was Ramses' foe at Kadesh, and Aleksandu, the king of Walusa, Muwatalli asked for guarantees of Walusan support should the Hittites attack the city of Lukka. So in some sources the Lukka are serving the Hittites and fighting alongside them, while in other sources they are in active rebellion to the Hittites. Now these are not entirely irreconcilable, as it's possible the Lukka fighting at Kadesh were mercenaries, whose loyalty to the Hittites lasted only so long as their pay did. The Tawagalawa Letter, dated to the reign of either Muwatalli II or Hattusili III, similarly shows Lukka in rebellion, but also appealing to the Hittites for aid. From a careful reading of this letter, a tentative background seems to be that a troublemaker named Piyamaradu was leading anti-Hittite activity in western Anatolia, and that a number of Lukka communities had appealed to him and relocated to Ahhiyawan territory, that is, somewhere within the Mycenaean world, perhaps around Miletus, known as Milawanda at the time. Some Lukka, though, were forcibly relocated against their wills and appealed to the Hittites for assistance. Elsewhere, the Annals of Hattusili mention Lukka as being in rebellion. It's unclear if this is a separate incident than what is recounted in the Tawagalawa Letter, or if it is in fact the same incident. In the Yalburt Inscription, dated to the reign of Suppiluliuma IV, we get perhaps our best picture of the Lukka Lands. In it, the Hittite king Suppiluliuma describes a campaign into Lukka territory, giving specific toponyms that are associated with the region, many of which can be identified with known locations from classical antiquity. The territory is here referred to as the Lukka Lands, not simply Lukka or Lucky. So there may be some distinction that is made here, but if there is, it's not fully clear what the difference may be. But if we accept the claims in the text, then Suppiluliuma campaigned through the Xanthos River Valley and claimed, "In these lands, the great kings of Hatti, my fathers and grandfathers, no one has marched." This would suggest any historic connection between the Hittites and the Lukka lands was indirect, though it's possible Suppiluliuma's claims may be more propagandistic than historic. But this conquest would seem to be short-lived. In a letter of instruction left by Suppiluliuma, he lists territories that are definitively enemy territory, places like Kashka and Azi, and along with them he lists the Lukka land. Suppiluliuma's successor, Suppiluliuma II, claims to have conquered Lukka as well as Tarhuntasha. The king of Tarhuntasha was a relative of Suppiluliuma, and he had styled himself Great King, something the Great King of the Hittites could not tolerate. So the campaign to the Lukka lands is likely ancillary to the greater target of Tarhuntasha. And the fact that Tarhuntasha may not have been an entirely friendly kingdom at this point would make campaigning into Lukka from Hatti logistically difficult. But it doesn't seem Suppiluliuma maintained any significant control over the Lukka lands. Archaeologists have found a letter at Ugarit which was sent to the last king of Ugarit named Amarapi and was sent by an unnamed great king of the Hittites. Given the chronology of the Ugaritic kings, this Hittite king is almost certainly Suppiluliuma II. It is noteworthy there is a companion letter sent with this one by someone named Penny Sharuma that has very similar contents but is less detailed. In the letter under discussion, the king states, "This time, didn't I send you Shatali? Now I've been told that the Ahhiyawa man is in the land of Lukka and there are no rations for him. Concerning this matter, don't tell me that there is nothing to do. Provide ships to Shatali and let them take the rations for the Ahhiyawa men." There are a few proposed interpretations of this letter, but what seems most likely is that a royal envoy, Shatali, arrived with the letter to Ugarit, and Ugarit was instructed to send him to the Lukka lands to carry out a commercial enterprise. The term translated ration may not refer to food rations, but may refer to bars of precious metals, like silver or copper being most likely. Much has been made of the Ahhiyawa men, the first Akkadian reference found to the polity known as Ahhiyawa in Hittite sources. And it's been suggested that these were mercenaries employed by the Hittite king who were in need of their agreed-upon payment. Hittite mercenaries in a rebellious region make some sense, but the kingdom of Ahhiyawa and the Hittites never had, or at least never sustained, particularly warm relations, so Ahhiyawan mercenaries may seem a bit odd. Itzmar Singer has proposed this was instead a commercial enterprise between the Hittites and Ahhiyawa that was being facilitated by Ugarit. It was being sent to one of the sheltered harbors of the Lukka region, a region theoretically not hostile to either entity involved. And the shipwrecks at Ulubarun and Cape Caledonia, both off the coast of the Lukka lands, attest to this area as a commercial shipping lane. One final text, also from Ugarit, again mentions Lukka. In a letter between the kings of Ugarit and Alashia, the king of Ugarit reports that all of his ships are in the land of Lukka. Scholars have hypothesized that his ships were there to try and intercept the ships of raiders and groups of the sea peoples and defend the sea lanes between the Aegean and the Levantine coast. And while it's not clear when this letter was written, Amurapi was a contemporary of Merneptah. And it's Merneptah who records the Lukka as being alongside others aiding the Libyans in their invasion of Egypt. With their ships abroad, we know things went poorly for Ugarit, and as Ugarit goes silent, so too do our sources on the Lukka Lands. The Lukka notably do not feature in their reliefs or inscriptions of Ramses III. They are not included in his coalition of sea peoples. After Merneptah's inscription, the Lukka do not appear in Egyptian sources until the 11th century in the Onomasticon of Amenepi, where it is listed between Hatti, Pedasa, and Arzawa. We don't know Lukka's fate as it went through the Bronze Age collapse. What we can say is Lukka passed from history into myth. Its reputation as a rough and loud place stuck with it, though. Its warriors were celebrated in Homeric tradition as allies of Troy. Lycia was the home of the fire-breathing Chimera. It was where Leto sought refuge from Hera. And while among the sea peoples, the Lukka may be among the best understood, we still haven't excavated any Lukka sites dating to the Late Bronze Age. So while we may know more about them than their comrades, there's still quite a few mysteries to solve.